I hear people like you all the time that say, if Republicans would just do this, I would vote for them. And I don't think you'll ever vote for them. I'll ask you, right? Who did you vote for, if you don't mind saying, in the previous election for president?
Oh, I mean, I voted Democrat my whole life prior to 2024.
But in 2024, did you vote for Trump?
No, I did. My position in 2024, I've been Pisco and I have like a running series on this because he just can't believe that when this comes out of my mouth. I thought Trump was better of the two options, but I thought his position on the 2020 election was disqualifying.
So then why would with all due respect, and I do respect you, Ryan, but why do I care what you think? You're a reasonable person that saw the unreasonable lawfare against Trump, and you still didn't vote for Trump. So your argument is, well, now Trump shouldn't employ the same tactics against them because it would discourage me from thinking he's reasonable and voting for him. But you didn't vote for him. So why should we as Trump supporters care what people like you are like? Well, what we would like to see is more reasonableness. You didn't vote for him when you saw the Democrats being unreasonable.
Though I would say that the 20 million Democrats who didn't vote for Harris that voted for Biden in the previous cycle is what won Trump the election.
Like was it 20? Was that number accurate? Was it 20 million?
I thought that. What was the enthusiasm gap?
Well, there was. I know what happened was that was the initial number, but I think because
it might have closed over time.
Right, because the mail-in ballots, that come. So let's see. How many? Let's see if I could look it up. But please keep talking. I'll look it up. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. But I think the point is that in the general election, you can't run only on your base. You have to run towards the center a bit. Everyone does, right? Everyone knows you run to your base in the primary, you run to the center in the general. And Harris lost because she couldn't convince people like me that she was a real centrist. And Trump won because he actually was, and in my mind is, more center than the Democrats are on a lot of issues, especially like the common sense ones. So yeah, I do think that like keeping the kind of, I'll call it the adults in the room vote available to you is important politically. I think that that's going to be a big deal going forward. And I think the definition of left and right is changing, man. And there's a reshaping happening, and I think the Republicans actually could peel off a huge percentage of the kind of growing independents in the next generation.
So it's hardly matters. You're directionally correct. It was about 12 million more votes, okay. 11.9, and then Trump received 3 million more votes. So directionally, you're right. But I just wondered that because I remember when that number came out, everyone was like 20 million less votes. And then it was like, well, wait a minute, California's still counting, weeks later. But now I think that from my perspective, I hear people like you all the time that say, if Republicans would just do this, I would vote for them. And I don't think you'll ever vote for them. I think that I really don't care what people that are centrist that say, please, 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 we should not punish the people that use lawfare against you and the people you support. Let's leave cooler heads prevail. And then they'll lose. Republicans will lose. In fact, I think maybe a lot of people in Trump's base, like myself, will be unwilling to vote for people like Trump in the future if they don't employ the very tactics that were employed against them and us. That's what I think. And so I just ultimately think that it'll always be for the centrist. One more step. If you had just did this one more thing, and you'll always be willing to forgive those Democrats. You'll go back to them, would be my guess. I think in the 2028 election, if Trump does to them what they did to him, you'd say, well, that was too far. Now I'll vote for Democrats. So I just think that it's coming from a place of you would like to see populism change and MAGA change to more closely fit you. But the reality is you were never the voter that they were trying to get anyways, because you could watch the blatant lawfare against Trump and still give the thumbs up and say, nah, that's still acceptable enough that I won't vote for Trump. So I think that Trump would be, now we'll see how it would play out, but I think Trump would be behooved to protect himself, to go after his opponents, to get his pound of flesh in hopes of the mutual assured destruction stopping, as opposed to being milquetoast and allowing his enemies to proceed to do this against him and his allies in the future.
I think it would be a huge mistake. And the reason I think it would be a huge mistake is if you I can only speak to myself as an example, but if you look at my positions and the ones I've staked out publicly, no, I did not vote for Trump because I thought that the issues not with the January 6th riot, but with the actual false slate of electors that actually was disqualifying for me. But the reason it's disqualifying for me is I take this Constitution, individual rights very seriously. I'm an originalist. I wanted to vote for Trump because I wanted to keep the court originalist. I'm a small government federalist. I want the federal government to be smaller. I think that the DEI extravaganza went so far that the Democrats, and this is what I'm debating with Pisco next time I go on his show, the Democrats were on the verge of instantiating actual racism into the law. Like that was their party position, was that they were trying to make certain forms of discrimination legal. So like the gap between where the Democrats were and where I was profound. It was really rough. And if it had been DeSantis or Haley or Pence, I would have voted Republican. If it had been Vance, I would have voted Republican. I had a issue.
Why? Vance accepted the alternate slate of electors.
He didn't do it.
Yeah, but he accepted it. You'll be okay with that?
I think that Vance's level of culpability is very different than Trump's level of culpability.
Yeah, but if the idea is that we want and return to originalist constitutionalism, we think what Trump did was so far afoul of that, wouldn't that mean that a president that you have the choice of voting for that says, actually, I think that was great and I would do the same thing if the same situation occurred, that wouldn't be disqualifying?
No, man. I think that what Vance is doing is, he's got a boss and he's talking to his boss and he's pleasing his boss. And I think we all know what that is. Vance is many things. He's very slick and he's an extraordinary communicator, and he's going to be a juggernaut in 2028. But yeah, I don't think that's the same thing. The truth is, and I wish this wasn't so, because I would have been. I thought the Democrats deserved to lose, so I was tempted to vote against them. I do think Trump has a uniquely lawless streak, not meaning that he goes out of his way to violate the law, meaning that, I don't think he really cares about it that much. Which is, for better or worse, I just don't think I think he's the kind of guy, and as a lawyer, I'm not going to name names, we have these clients where, your client says, they say, man, I really want to buy this company. And you're like, I think that would be illegal. And they go, tell me how I'm going to buy this company.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
I think that's who Trump is, right? I don't think he thinks the law has a moral component. I think that he views it as a game of enforcement, and he's been very good at winning that game. So, I think that's who he is. That's not that was disqualifying for me, but I don't throw shade at people who voted for him, because, like I said, I was very tempted because the Democrats had, in my opinion, they had lost their mind. And this might segue into the her stuff and the Biden stuff. The cover-up on Biden's health was just, Jon Stewart, I thought, had a really funny bit about it, where he was like, it's the worst cover-up of all time. Because, yes, it was covered up, but also everyone knew. It was so clear when people were saying, yeah, Biden's fit as a fiddle. Gavin Newsom said he does 3-hour Photoshop every day. Does 9 hours of events. And you're like, no, come on, man. No, he doesn't. We've all seen the guy.
So this is the last question. Oh, it's a two-parter, right? I think that Trump basically did what you're suggesting in this first term. He didn't go after Hillary Clinton, right? Even though he knew she was responsible for working with the FBI to start. He didn't. Did that prevent Democrats from using lawfare against him?
No, and that is, I think, and we'll have to go on Wick's channel to find the VODs. I really opposed the prosecution of Trump for exactly this reason. This is a genie that's very tough to get back in the bottle. It's literally a mob vendetta cycle, right? Where it's once you engage in vendetta, how does it ever really end? And you don't know. It's very hard to fix it. I do hope, and maybe this is something we can agree on, I do hope that maybe after a cycle or two of this, people are going to wake up to the overwhelming reality that the federal government and the presidency in particular are too powerful. And we need to dramatically ratchet down the size, the scale, the scope of the federal government, and restore power to the states, so that we can avoid having this kind of civil war fought vicariously in courts, because it's no way to govern. And I don't see another way to de-escalate. You just have to ratchet it way the F down.
I agree that the federal, though maybe we'd have a slight disagreement. I don't think that it's the president that's too powerful. I think it's the executive, in particular, the unelected bureaucrats. I think that they're really the ones that are powerful. And I think that giving power back to the states. But the last thing I'll say on this, and then I'll give you the final word, and we could jump into her or the 7-2 decision on the, whatever you want to go to. Trump's not going to be in the ballot in 2028, presumably. And so therefore, how about he just goes ahead and goes after all of his enemies, and then you'll forgive J.D. Vance by saying he was just supporting his boss, and you'll vote for him anyways?
Depends who the Democrats run.
Well, we'll see, right? That's fair, but that's fair no matter what Trump does. Why would you blame any potential Republican in 2028, or for that matter, the Republicans in the midterms, if Trump orders his DOJ to politically prosecute his opponents, when you've already forgiven Vance for saying that the thing you think was unforgivable for Trump, he supported? So in other words, whatever Trump does in sending the DOJ to go after his opponents, that should have, based on your logic, zero effect on whether or not you'll vote for Republicans in 2026 or 2028, right?
No, of course it's going to have an effect. And you look at the candidates in the totality. One of the things I look at is, do I think that they are going to support the rule of law and that they're going to restore kind of civility and decency to the way that we deploy the powers of the federal government against citizens, which is a huge fucking deal. Unfortunately, the Republicans don't have the best track record on that right now. If they could get a better track record on it, that would be fantastic. Now, it might be the case that you end up where everyone's dirty, and then that might be a wash, right? Like that could also be the case. But yeah, it depends who they're running. Like, if you're running like a Gavin Newsom, I wouldn't vote for him for dog catcher. So, it might be.
It's actually a good question. It might be out of your wheelhouse, but to get us transitioned, like, who do you think could run as a Democrat at this point that has any sort of credibility right now on the national stage that doesn't have the stink of sort of the Biden administration on them? Because you look at Buttigieg, I mean, he was in the administration, right? You look at Kamala, I mean, we know the problems with her. Gavin Newsom has his own problems. I think someone like maybe a Josh Shapiro here, the governor of Pennsylvania, I think that maybe he could distance himself. Like, do you think that that would be possible to kind of, because they need, like, am I wrong at this point? Is any problems there are with Trump, the polling shows that Democrats' popularity is tanking as well, if not worse. So it seems like they need a fresh face of some sort, right?
If they could nominate Josh Shapiro, it would show either that the Democratic machine has learned a lesson, which it seemed impossible up till now, or that there's actually been a shift. The thing is, though, and I'm not a David Hogg fan, by the way, but when you looked at David Hogg getting kicked out of the DNC because he wanted to primary establishment Democrats. Now, I don't actually want him to succeed on any of his political projects, so that's, he's a weird example for me. But what you saw is that the Democratic machine is just very tightly controlling in a way that the Republican machine, I don't think ever was, but even if it was, Trump smashed it to pieces when he won in 2016. So that it's been in shambles anyway, and I don't think it ever was that powerful. The Democrats need to show that they are not that party anymore. Josh Shapiro would be a great choice. Maybe there's somebody else out there lurking, some young talent.
Bashir is another person people talk about.
It's tough. If you put up somebody where they can play clips, like, you see when Newsom had Charlie Kirk on his podcast, and Newsom tried to go like, "Oh, I never said Latinx. That's crazy." And then CNN was like, "Come on, man. Here's the clip for you saying it." Because in 2020, 2022, the Democrats just drank deeply from a well of very bad ideas. And the people who are poisoned with that, you can't run. They're not viable nationally anymore. Like, nobody's going to vote for those people. So
I think the problem they have, though, is if you look at like the young talent base, like your David Hoggs or like your people in the squad, your AOCs, the problem is they're sort of have other problems that I think the people will find unpalatable, such as sort of more radical progressivism. And I think that the Democrats are at this interesting crossroads where sort of they need fresh faces, but the fresh faces that are upcoming are sort of antithetical to a lot of what the establishment level Democrats believe in. And so there's going to be this, I think there's going to be this civil war where if I'm a Democrat, I'm hoping that someone like, I'm no Josh Shapiro fan, mind you,
Mhm.
but I think he's far more sensible and palatable to sort of a centrist mindset than like an AOC or than like a Kamala Harris, if you go in the opposite direction of that. So I think it's interesting. It'll be neat to see. I know maybe that's not your forte,
Yeah.
offering prescriptions for the Democratic Party. Neither is it mine. But that's just the way I'm looking at it. If I'm in purely a trying to win mindset, it's like, what are they going to offer? Because I agree with you. I think a lot of there's going to be a bad taste in people's mouth from the Biden cover up. And I think, unfortunately for the Democrats, the Biden policies weren't as popular as they would have people believe. I think that people thought the country was going in a bad direction under Joe Biden.